What's up, YouTube? Robbie Vapes back again, and today we have the matchup you've all been waiting for. That's right, today is the day for the SIG 150 temperature control versus the IPV 3LI versus the X-Cube 2. Who wins? Stay tuned. That's right, guys, today is the battle you've all been waiting for. It's the battle between the SIG 150 TC, the IPV 3LI, and just for shits and giggles, I threw in a third device, the X-Cube 2. So, before we get into the review, I have to preface the entire thing by saying one thing, okay? All of these devices were purchased by me with my own money. They were not given to me, they were not sent to me, and they're not borrowed. These are all devices I've paid for. Okay, so keep that in mind. Further to that point, I will say this. I am happy with all three of these devices. There is not one device I'm displeased with. I like all three in their own ways, and they're all used in different scenarios for my vaping style. Just want to say that. So if you are looking for a clear-cut winner or a loser, or if there's one, if you're looking to get some advice and say, don't buy this one, you're not going to find it here, because I honestly am happy with all three of these purchases. Just saying. Now, with that being said, let's get into the categories for the head-to-head matchup. We have 5 to choose from. The first one, which seemed to be the most important to a lot of people based on my preview video, was the battery life, and I understand why. We'll get into that in just a minute, but in the meantime, let's talk about the other 4 categories. The next one we're going to be talking about is craftsmanship. We're going to be talking about the quality of them, the feel of them, the design of them, things like that. Third, we'll be talking about the chipsets. Now, 2 of these in particular have a very similar chipset. In fact, they both use the same chips with a few minor modifications, but we'll get to that later on. Fourth up, we have the overall temp control experience. All 3 of these devices do temp control. And with temp control, it's important to know which one you're going to get the better vape from. So what I'll do is I'll pick 2 or 3 temperatures to vape them all at, set them all to those temperatures, use my Crown temperature control or nickel coils to test them all out on. Then we'll also do a dry burn test as well to see if any of these will fire on a dry, brand new coil. Finally, we're going to talk about price. Now, of course, I always have this price rant, and I will say it again. I will go over what I paid for each of these devices. It's going to vary from what you paid. I'm in Canada. I get overcharged for shit. I'm used to it. That being said, I found some other prices online. I don't know how accurate they are. I don't know if there's any other fees. I just did a very quick search online to see what I could find each of these devices for as the cheapest I could see them. You may find them cheaper. Again, it was a quick search. But again, we'll talk about pricing at the end of the video. So, with that being said, let's talk battery life. Now, again, I have to specify one thing. I used the exact same married pair of batteries, my LG HG2 3000 mAh batteries, in all 3 of these devices to do this test. So, what were the outcomes? Well, and actually before we go into that, let's specify one more thing. All of them had the TFB4 tank on it, set to 100 watts even, and that would give you a benchmark for what you can expect battery life to be if you move it up or down from there. Just saying. So with that in mind, let's start with the SIG 150 temperature control device. I did not use temperature control for the battery on this particular test. That being said, you can probably expect a little bit less battery life, maybe a little bit more depending on where you vape at in temp control mode. I maxed it out. That's just me. You probably don't, I do. On wattage mode though, at 100 watts, with the LG HG2s, I had about 8 to 9 hours of battery life. It was somewhere in between there. And that is a normal average workday for me, vaping the way I normally do with my vaping style, 100 watts, which I would consider to be medium to heavy at best. I think heavy is actually a little bit is going to be pushing a little bit to say I vape heavy, especially during the work week. Probably not. I would say it's more of a medium or average amount of vaping. So I got about 8.5 hours out of the LG HG2s in the SIG 150 at 100 watts. The IPV 3LI, it was awesome. The battery life surprised the hell out of me, which And for that matter, that even surprised the hell out of me because I wasn't expecting any difference between these two because they are using pretty much the exact same chip. Ironically though, at 100 watts, vaping it on an average workday, I got 11 hours of battery on this, which is insane. 11 hours, 8.5. That is a 2.5 hour difference of extended battery on this at 100 watts. Now again, I should specify this has been upgraded. I don't know if that makes a difference to battery life or not, but it's something to keep in mind. Finally, the X-Cube. Again, LG HG2s, 100 watts, the Smok TFV4 tank on top of it, the entire time, nothing else. Battery life on this one, fucking amazing. This one I'm getting about 13 hours of battery life out of. 100 watts, TFV4 on it the whole time, LG HG2s, normal workday. 13 hours. That is nuts. The difference between the first place and the last place one for battery life is almost 5 hours. It's 4.5 hours. And I had to do the math there for a second. Yes, it's 4.5 hours of battery difference between the SIG 150 and the X-Cube. I was shocked by this because I cannot figure out why the SIG 150 has such poor battery life. It uses the same chip as the IPV 3LI with a few changes, but again, the same chip pretty much, at the same wattage, the same tank on top, and yet somehow it was just hitting, it just wasn't getting the battery life I was hoping for. So obviously the winner in the battery category has to go to the X-Cube. I have never had such great battery life out of a mod before. 13 hours. That is insane. I mean, I can bring this out on a weekend or like during a weekend for like a Saturday or whatever and vape it from like morning to night pretty much. I change my batteries at like 11 o'clock at night. Like, it's insane. The IPV 3LI I thought was great, and I didn't think anything would beat it. But having the X-Cube, the one clear advantage to the X-Cube in my mind is how much more battery life I'm getting from it. Just saying. Now that being said, again, those were the LG HG2s, the 3000 milliamp hour batteries. I did try the Smurfs and all these as well. The Smurfs did not hold up as well. This one got about 6.5 hours on the Smurfs. This one only had about 8 hours on the Smurf. And this one only had about 8.5 hours on the Smurf. So I don't know why, but this one just doesn't seem to like Smurfs. On top of that, when you look at the battery level on the device, if you put Smurfs in, it only shows up as like 3/4 full every time for a fully charged battery, which I thought was just crazy. These ones will show up as full, but then once you run them down to a low enough percentage left, for example, the Sigelei will actually die out at about 28 to 30%. The IPV 3LI got down to 23%, and this one will actually die out at 0%. It will keep on going. That's the biggest difference. And I think what's happening with this, and I could be wrong, but I think that once this battery starts getting low, it kind of adjusts the amount of vapor and the amount of, I don't know if it necessarily adjusts the wattage, but it definitely adjusts the power of the device to some extent to help you increase battery life and to get that last little bit of battery out of them. And I think that's what's actually pushing it ahead in the battery test, was the fact that it will run empty. These ones don't. These ones, like I said, they will not fire below a certain percentage. Yes, like for example, I had the SIG 150 down to 30%, and when I cranked it down to about 70 watts, it started firing again. Which is weird because a second ago it said the battery was dead, and now all of a sudden it's firing again. So at 100 watts, keep that in mind. You are losing out on battery, but you're also losing out on the percentage of battery you can actually vape on. This one, for some reason, just self-regulates itself and will give you that extra bit of battery life. So, ultimately, battery test, I think all three of these will last you an average workday, give or take, but I definitely suggest bringing spare batteries for the SIG, and I'd even suggest bringing spare batteries for the other two just in case. If you're working for long shifts, you never know. And it, of course, does vary on what battery you're actually using in there. Like I said, the Smurfs definitely were nowhere near as good as the LG HG2s. I just picked up today the eFest 3000 milliamp hour batteries that they just released, so I'm looking forward to see how well they do compared to the HG2s, because the HG2s by far are the best batteries for longevity. So, with that being said, that is battery life. What do you say we get down and dirty and check out the Craftsmanship / design, the Chipset, and we'll even check out a little bit of the temp control in there as well. So let's do it. Let's get down and dirty and check. That is right. We are down and dirty with these 3 devices, and the first thing we're going to talk about is the craftsmanship and quality of the design. So with that being said, let's talk about the Sigelei 150 temperature control first. Now, one of the things I like about this is the rubberized kind of grippy finish it has to it. It's got a really nice feel to it, and just something about it just feels really good in the hands. I've heard some issues about people complaining about the battery door being a little bit loose. Mine doesn't seem to have that issue. If I'm holding it like this, it doesn't come out. It's still stuck there, as you can see, and it's not really sliding much. I have heard people say it will on them, but again, it's not really a big deal for me. Second thing is, obviously this design is a little bit different. It has the kind of like an elevated 510 connection up here, rather than having the whole thing flat like the other 2 devices you'll see soon. It does have this elevation to it. Does it make a difference? Honestly, it really doesn't. You know, you don't grip it up here. It's not like it's being used for anything, having it like this. It's really just a design feature. So overall, not much I can say about the elevated 510 connection up here. But, you know, maybe some people like it, some people don't. It's all based on preference right now. Now again, I just want to talk about just the overall kind of design of this. I had no issues with it out of the box. It came really well packaged. It was just super clean. There weren't any issues with any kind of dirt or anything in it. The 510 connection pin was very clean. It is a spring-loaded 510 connection pin, by the way, which I believe all these are actually, so they're all 510 spring-loaded. Most devices are these days. I don't know very many that don't do 510 spring-loaded, but I figured I'd bring that up just in case anyone was wondering. Next thing, I mean, again, just overall, it feels like a very high-end device, and I guess in a way it should, because technically speaking, this was the one I paid the most for, but I'll save that for the pricing discussion later on. So overall, quality design, really nice, feels great in the hands, and I really like how they listened to initial feedback on the 150 original, which was very boxy and very almost like had like these really sharp corners to it. And by sharp, I don't mean like you're going to cut yourself, but I'm referring mainly to just the fact that it just felt like really weird in the hand. It was really just didn't feel good in the hand, in my opinion. This one, on the other hand, feels much better. It's just overall, it's just a really good feel. And this little kind of rounded edge back here works perfectly. Next up, we have the IPV 3LI. And with this one, it's kind of funny because we just talked about these sharp edges, and that is exactly what this one has, is sharp edges. As you can see here, it's just got these really, it makes it feel more bulky than it actually is, just having these edges here. It's just not good. I don't like how it feels, to be honest. The battery door, of course, you don't have to worry about coming out because it's actually a pain in the ass trying to get the batteries out. You have to put a lot of pressure down and slide it. And you can see up here you have a ball bearing to lock it into place. Of course, you have one of these little things, which the Sigelei had as well. I just didn't show it. And again, you have this kind of door here, and I don't know. I mean, it works, and it's definitely secure. You're not going to have to worry about the battery door coming loose, and it's going to take a lot more pressure to get it off. So you're not going to accidentally take it off in your pocket or anything like that. The Sig 150, if it got caught on something in your pocket, it could definitely take off the battery door. And even the Smok X Cube 2 would do the same thing, which I'll show you in a second here. Firing button, again, really good. No rattle in this device. The Sig 150 as well, same thing. The only rattle is actually in the battery compartment. The buttons themselves don't rattle. It's just all coming from the battery compartment. Now moving on, the overall design on the Smok X Cube 2. Again, you have this magnetic battery door, which I kind of like. It's always fun just playing around with it. But we take it off, and the one thing I don't like about this are these springs in here. These springs are just super messy. You can see they're already starting to like bend a little bit. I've only had this device for a little over a week now, and I will say this, I am not sure how those springs will hold up over time. So something to keep an eye out for sure. But again, the battery door itself, as you're vaping, it really doesn't come loose or anything like that. One thing I do like about this is this giant trigger button here, which is the entire side of the device. You push it in, and it will go off. Next thing we'll talk about is the LEDs. As you can see, I do have mine on right now. I had them on for the battery test as well to make it fair, and it still lasted, like I said, 13 hours with those LGs in there. The screen up top here versus on the side, like you'd see on, say, the Sigelei or the IPV 3LI, I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I kind of like it, I kind of don't. I pretty much have mixed feelings about it, to be honest. But again, you can see the screen here, lights up. It's a little bit hard to get used to, but honestly, it's not the end of the world. So again, designed for the top rather than on the side. Yeah, it's not a bad feature at all. Again, you have the buttons here, and as you can see here, just by rolling over them, they are very, very clicky. And I can shake this, and it's just the buttons rattling a lot. This one has major button rattle. That being said, this is finished in more of a silver. It's very smooth, and I can see it being a lot easier to drop compared to, say, the Sigelei. Again, I haven't dropped mine yet, but if I do, I'm assuming it's going to be mainly because of this kind of finish they have here, which is just really, really slippery almost. But it is a nice finish, and I will say this, it really doesn't show fingerprints that well, which is a good thing. Obviously, you don't want your device to show fingerprints, but this one really does have a nice finish to it. At the bottom here, you do have a micro USB connection, and on the bottom of this one, you also have one as well. Now, like I said before, I did use that USB connection to upgrade this. One thing I will say is, from what I can tell, neither of these actually will charge your batteries. These ports at the bottom do not charge the batteries, from what I could tell. I did try plugging them both in. None of them started charging the batteries, or none of them showed that they were charging the batteries, so I'm going to assume not to use this to charge batteries in. This is only for upgrades and upgrades only. Now, we'll talk about upgrades a little bit more in the chipset, but one thing I want to point out is the Sigelei does not have a micro USB cord or any USB connection port at all, which means you're stuck with it the way it is. It will not upgrade. Now let's start out the chipset conversation by going over the two that are very identical, and they actually both use the same chip. The IPV 3LI, I can get it to focus there, and the SIG 150 temp control. Like I said, very similar chips on these two. One thing I will say is that with each of these chips, we'll go over each of them individually actually. Let's start with the Sigelei 150 temperature control. So right now it is in temp control mode. And if I can get it to focus here, let's see if that helps. There we go. So we have the focus in right now. It only actually lights up if you hold the button down, which is kind of annoying because you want it to be bright when it's not necessarily being fired. You want it to be dull when it's being fired, which I always wondered why that was, but just, I guess, a bit of observation from my end. Now again, to work this chip, very simple. Your firing button does a lot of the work, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have the option for system on. If you scroll to the right, it'll turn it off. Or if you want to scroll to the next menu item, just hit the power button. Right now it's in mode dual. If you want to change it to power, we simply click it over, and it's in power button. Now we have the option to exit, we exit. As you can see here, it's in power mode, 100 watts, 5.3 volts. It's reading the coil at 0.28, which obviously it's not because it's a temp control coil, which is probably why it's not reading the coil very well. There we go. So I just hit the fire button and now it corrected itself, and I've noticed that before. On occasion, you'll have to hit the fire button once just to correct the ohmage, and just something to take note of. Let's go back into the menu, and let's turn it on to dual mode. Dual mode is your temp control mode, so keep that in mind. We'll scroll over, we can choose Fahrenheit or Celsius. We're going to stick to Fahrenheit. Next up, you have the temperature. I have it maxed out at 572, as you can see. If we scroll all the way down, we'll see it should go down to, I believe, 212. But let's just confirm that. We'll go all the way down and just see how low it will go. So there you go, I was right. 212 degrees Fahrenheit is the lowest temp, and of course 572 is the highest one. Now I do wish they had a way to kind of round robin it a little bit, because it does take a little while to go from the lowest setting to the highest setting. Although, in all fairness to them, most people aren't going to be vaping 212 one second and 572 the next. But just something to note, it is kind of interesting that it doesn't do a round robin when you're scrolling through the temperature settings. Next up after temp, we have exit, of course. We'll go through it again, system on, mode dual, Fahrenheit, temp, and to exit back into the menu. Again, 0.14 ohms, temperature control. As you can see here, I have it set to 100 joules, which is 4.0 volts, and 572 degrees Fahrenheit. And just quick fire. You can just kind of hear it firing over there. moving on to the chip in the IPV 3LI, we can see here when we do the check atomizer, of course, because that's always fun. And I probably should put an atomizer on here, but let's just scroll through the menu. So as you can see here, you have your, I'm just going to move this out of the way. You have your menu up front here, and again, what we'll do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, same menu, system on, mode joule, Fahrenheit, temperature's 572. You can select the coil as well from nickel or titanium, which is a nice feature that the Sigelei 150 didn't have. And of course, exit on or off. We'll exit it for now. In temp mode, you have your joules, you have your volts, your ohms, and the temperature plus your battery life as well, of course. Moving on, let's go to 5 clicks. Mode is now in power mode, and exit. And it's that simple. We're up to 130 watts right now on this. Of course, you can go up and down. But one of the things actually I do want to touch on for this one in particular is the fact that we can see here it's adjust, but if we wait a second, it'll say M1 or M2, and that's basically your preset settings. So you can see here, it's still saying adjust. Let's actually go back to Sigelei for a second, because it's one of the features that Sigelei does not have is the stored, basically your stored settings list in wattage mode, and it's upside down, of course. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, power, exit. You can see you get really quick with it the more you use it, but all I do is up and down for the wattage. It doesn't actually give me the stored preset mode like the IPV will. And going back here, it should be good now. We can see here it's adjust, and that's because I keep hitting the down button. But as you can see here, now we're in the M1, M2, M3, M4, and M5. So as you can see here, I can make different settings or save different wattages for each of these 5 modes. I, for some reason, tend to vape at 130 watts for a lot, which is why I have 3 of them set to that, but you can actually set it to anything you want. And that's just something to keep in mind. So you do have 5 preset saved settings in here. This one does not. That's one of the biggest differences between the 2 chips, but there is one more, and I'll get to it right here. We're going to go into the joule mode, Fahrenheit, temp. You can select nickel and titanium as well, which is a good feature that the Sigelei doesn't have. And here you can see it's set to 10 joules. Do not get that wrong. That is not 100 joules. That is 10. We scroll up. Now we're at 50. This is just another preset, as you can see, M5. I'm going to scroll down, and now it lets me adjust, but I can't go past 50 joules. Now, I've heard that it's supposed to go up to 100 joules, but I could not get it to work to 100 joules. Mine, after the upgrade, still only goes up to 50 joules. And just to prove it is upgraded, so again, 50 is the maximum joules set for this device. So yes, you have the option of titanium, but it only goes up to 50 joules, which is a bit of a piss off. Anyways, let's go back into the menu. Let's select power mode, and let's show you the 200 watt mark just to show you that it has been upgraded. Although, I guess the other proof that it's been upgraded is the fact that it accepts titanium coils, which is part of the upgrade, not part of the original. But as you can see here, we're just scrolling up here, really fast to scroll through, which is nice. And there we go, 200 watts, the maximum wattage on there, which I actually have used, by the way, on the Twisted Mess RDA with the Fuse Claptons. So that's the chip on there. Moving on, let's go to the last chip, and that is the Smok X Cube 2. So we hit the button, there it is, and I apologize, it's not very bright. In fact, I'm going to take this tank off just for the sake of doing this screen check, I guess. So it should be a little bit easier to see now, hopefully. Anyways, you have the wattage set over here, and you also have the up-down button. One thing I should mention is that there is an app for this. I could not get it to work on my phone, but I know other people who have. I don't know if it's just my phone. I'm using a Note 3, but for some reason it just wouldn't work. That being said, you can adjust the wattage up and down by using these 2 buttons. 105, you can go up, and I believe this goes up to 165 watts, if I'm not mistaken, but let's just check that out real quick to make sure. Or, sorry, that's actually 160 watts, is the maximum it'll go. And we can scroll down, and of course it'll go down to about 10 watts, give or take. I don't vape that low. I don't think many people are going to buy it to vape below 10 watts, so I'm just going to say it goes from 10 watts to 160, even though I'm pretty sure I'm wrong on that. So just bear with me on that one, and just a heads up on that. Now, we have 2 different ways to use the trigger button. If we click it 5 times, it locks the system. Now it won't go off my pocket. and it does show that lock screen there when I hit the trigger. 5 clicks, it's now unlocked. If I hold both the up and down button at the same time, it'll say Bluetooth on or Bluetooth off. And that's supposed to help you with your app that you have, which, of course, like I said, mine doesn't work, unfortunately, but for most people it should. 1, 2, 3. Now we have the option to sort out the Bluetooth. We hit the trigger button again, and we can select the mode. If we hold the trigger button down, we can select what mode we want to do. Watt mode, temp mode, memory mode, and it goes back to watt mode. So if we select watt mode, we have further options now here to do max, hard, normal, soft, and minimum. These are basically, and again, this is actually a little bit more to do with your vaping style. So if you want to max, or if you use max setting on this, it'll basically give you, from what I can tell, it gives you a much denser cloud, which leads to a bit of a bigger throat hit. If you do minimum, you're going to have a little bit more of a wispy cloud, and it's going to be less of a throat hit. That's just, and of course, anything in between is going to be somewhere in between, like that wispiness and that really dense vape that you get out of it. Let's go back into the menu here. So we talked about the mode. Let's go into the LED. You can turn the LEDs on and off from here. You have the puff counter as well. Your settings, let's go into that and show you what you have. You have a screen time, the contrast. You have the screen direction, so I can flip it so that this would be right side up if I wanted to. But I'm going to keep it here for now. Screen normal. Screen rotate, we'll keep it normal. Go back into settings. Settings, contrast, screen, and you have the time. You can also adjust the ohms to lock it into place, which is a really nice feature. One of the things I like about this is I can lock the TFV4 at 0.15 ohms with the quad coil in here, whereas the other two devices seem to be a little bit all over the place on it. It's not super off, but it's definitely off enough where it's just kind of an OCD thing. It'll go from like 0.14 to like 0.17 on the Sigelei or the IPV4 or on the IPV 3LI. On this one, you can lock it into place, so it'll always be 0.15, which, as you can actually, you can't see it here because it's not attached to the device, but if it was, it would be reading at 0.15. Let's go back to the menu, and let's go to, you also have the option to turn it off. Let's go back to the settings, and again, time, adjust the ohms, and you also have the option to download any kind of patches or updates. So this one will allow you to do updates on it as well, just like the IPV 3LI. And unfortunately, that's the one downside to the Sigelei, is you cannot upgrade it. Just saying. So with that in mind, that pretty much tells us what that pretty much goes over the chipset here. As you can see, we've gone over each of the chips. For the chipsets themselves, which one do I like better? I really wish the app would have worked on this because it would have been a really good complement to this device. But that being said, it's not the end of the world that it doesn't, because most of the things you can do from the app, you can do from here. You can control your LEDs, and again, you'll actually be able to change the color if you wanted to. You can adjust the duration of a hit. So for example, if you have a 4-second hit, you can start it out at, say, 80 watts, and then after 1 second it goes to 90 watts, and after 2 seconds it goes to 120 watts, and after 4 seconds it goes back down to 110 watts, let's say. And you can actually adjust the control of the hit, so it starts increasing and gets gradually more and more. You can do it so it gradually decreases over time. You can do it so it goes up and then down, depending on how long your hit is. And again, it's all customizable from the app, which again does not work for me, unfortunately. But just something to know. So those are the 3 screens, or the 3 chips, I should say. The big question is, which one is the winner for me? Honestly, I've gotten used to all 3 of them. I can go through them pretty quickly. As you can pretty much see through the video, or through this video, I've gone through each of them very quickly. You get used to them very fast, and honestly, none of them are really too complex. But I think for overall features and chip design, I think the X-Cube 2 does get it, and not because of the app, although if it did work, it would just be a bonus, but just because of how easy it is to use and just how many features you have. Like I said, that adjustable ohm, or the lock-in the ohm feature, is awesome. It's probably my favorite feature on this. I love that it locks it in. It's just one of those things where it's a great little feature. You do have Bluetooth as well. Being able to choose your kind of strength of your hit, if you want to go like soft or if you want to go max or anything in between, max, hard, normal, and soft or minimum. Again, you have the option to choose, which is a really nice feature. I like that you can choose that. And it does actually work to a certain extent. I don't know how it works. I don't know what it's supposed to be doing, but it's definitely doing something that helps with the throat hit and the overall vapor production as well, as far as density goes. So, with that being said, the X Cube definitely gets my vote on the chipset. I love it. The SX chip, which is what both of these run, it's good, but it's honestly just not for me. Like, for example, the multiple settings, I hardly ever use. In fact, if anything, I'm actually happy the Sigelei didn't have it, because it's kind of a pain in the ass wanting to scroll up and not being able to because you keep rotating through your settings. Now to solve that, so when you're rotating, as you can see here, all I have to do is click up and it's upside down again. But all I can do is go up and then it'll let me rotate through all my saved settings. If you want to adjust it, you have to press down first and then start going up. Or you just go down all the way if you want to decrease it. But most of the time I'm increasing wattage, not decreasing, so it's just a pain in the ass having to hit down first and then go up. Now once you hit down, it will stay in adjust mode for a little while, basically until you fire it, or after, I think it's like a 5-second timeout or something like that. So it's not too bad, but just something to keep an eye out for. So the overall chip winner is definitely the X Cube 2 in my mind. Moving on, this is going to be a really cool test. What we're going to be doing now is trying to dry burn a coil on each of these devices in temp mode to see if it will actually dry burn on any of them. So what I'm going to do here, take the tank apart, put a brand new unused coil completely dry in here, and we'll put the device on all three of them and see which one hits on or hits the coil while dry and which one seems to pass the test. Alright guys, so one more thing to touch base on that I didn't really talk about. So one of the things is if we hit the fire button 3 times, go to mode and go to temp mode, you do have the option to go max to soft as well, or sorry, min to max as well. If we go to, let's go to maximum on this. Now you also have the option to set the nickel, and of course, you also have the option for nickel SC or nickel DC. SC is single coil and DC is dual coil, just so you guys know. I'm going to use a dual coil because this is a dual coil technically for the crown here, and as you can see, it is a brand new, unjuiced, completely bone dry coil I have on here. And what we're going to do is fire it on the maximum temperature and see what happens. So let's just see here. Is this a new coil? Yes, it is. And as you can see here, it's cutting out right away. Oh, you know what? It's actually burning it. So here we have a bone dry wick, and I can smell it from here. It's hitting, and it's definitely burning. You can actually kind of see the smoke starting to come up a little bit. It is definitely burning right there. So that is not a good sign. This did not pass the dry wick test. So that's just something to keep in mind. It does seem to be kind of shutting off, but there we go. So after a while, it finally shut off, but by that time, smoke's already been produced. I'm smelling it right here from here. So the nickel is definitely burning, so that is a coil I will not be using again now that it's already burnt the cotton here. Let's change devices, switch it on to the Sigelei 150 next, and see what it does. Alright guys, next up we have the Sigelei, and we're going to try and fire it and see if we see what happens here. We'll also do a fire up top so you see the top view, and then on the side so you can see what it says on the side if it says anything. So, as you can see here, maxed out as well, 572 Fahrenheit, 100 joules, and let's see how it fires. Doesn't appear to be firing from what I can see. I'm not seeing any smoke come out. I don't smell any burning this time, but let's just try it one more time. And you know what? I think it is firing actually. It is definitely firing, yep. So it's firing at a completely bone dry coil, and it's firing, and as you can see here, oh, there we go. So now it's saying no liquid. So it will stop if you hit the fire button with no liquid in here. It is saying that, so that's good. I would be surprised if the IPV performed differently since they're pretty much the exact same chip, but it will be interesting to know. One thing I will say is that it did fire at first, but since then it now seems to be stopping. So for some reason, that first 2 times I hit the fire button, it definitely fired. There's definitely a bit of smoke coming up, but from there, it's now going to dry coil. So that's good. I'll give that kind of a half pass.
I still don't know if I'd trust it though if it got down, especially if it was still firing the first couple times, but since then it seems to be okay. But again, it's not nickel. Burning dry cotton and burning nickel is not something you want to do because it will produce gases that you do not want to inhale. And that's the exact reason why I will not be using this coil. In fact, I'll be throwing out immediately after this video just to make sure no one else ends up using it by mistake. So let's switch over to the IPV 3LI and see what it does. Alright guys, we have the IPV 3LI here. You can see here it has 572, which is max, 50 joules, which is the maximum I can get on it for some reason. And let's hit it from up top for you first and see what happens. That is definitely firing. That is really bad. I mean, that you can even see the coil glowing. In the other two, you couldn't see the coil glowing. In this one, you clearly see it. That is not good at all. And just confirm settings. Oh, that smell is terrible. Anyways, just to confirm settings, 572, 50 joules. And let's just go into here just to make sure it is set to nickel. And as you can see here, it is in fact set to nickel. So on nickel, this thing failed badly. The other two didn't glow like that did, but man, this is bad. This is really bad. I had no idea. I'm happy I did this test because I had no idea that that was happening. And again, no message at all. Nothing saying it's, you know, dry hitting. This is a brand new bone dry, not even wicked coil, and it is performing very badly in temperature control. In fact, so badly I would say do not use this device in temperature control, because you do run the risk of hitting the nickel to the point where you could produce nickel poisoning, and I do not recommend that at all. You are talking a major dry burn here. That is bad. I mean, it's glowing really badly here. The cotton is now completely black. I was not expecting that. I mean, if the X-Cube failed, this one failed miserably. This is just terrible. I would have never guessed this would have happened. And it makes me rethink using any sort of temperature control on this device. Even titanium I don't think I'd use on this device for that purpose. It is clearly not working the way it should be.
Alright guys, that was pretty scary, but we are back up top now, and before we get into the actual temperature Vape-off, a few things I want to actually clarify from the up-close portion of the video, and just a few things I just want to talk about a little bit. So first of all, one thing I missed in the Sigelei portion, or when I was talking about the Sigelei in the quality control, is the fact that when this screen is on, you can hear a very slight ringing sound. And it's slight, and I actually can't pick it up on camera, but you will hear it if you put it to your ear. And it's a very high-pitched, like a ringing sound. But it's only when the screen is on. The screen's off, and it's dead quiet. Just one thing to know. It's probably not going to be effective, or it's probably not going to affect you for ordinary vaping, but if for whatever reason you like putting your vaping device to your ear while the screen's on, just be aware of that. The next thing I wanted to talk about that I kind of missed and didn't really talk enough about was the X-Cube 2 and the settings I talked about with the maximum, the minimum, the soft. What it actually does is it'll increase the power output by 10% for the first 2 seconds for every level you go up. Which I guess kind of ties into the whole, you know, more dense vapor on maximum and a much less dense vape on minimum. But again, just wanted to clarify that that's actually what it's doing. The next thing I want to talk about is a bunch of features you can do when the device is locked. Like if you hit the fire button and the up button while it's locked, it'll show you like the date. If you hit the fire button and the down button while it's locked, it'll show you the time. There's a bunch of things you can do. Personally, I will never use that, but just be advised there are some other features on there that I guess some people might find handy. Also, one of the things I want to touch on the X-Cube that I talked about, but I will say this. There's actually a warning in the instructions that this USB port is not meant to be used for charging. And it says that right in the instructions. So I was correct when I tried plugging them in real quick. Neither of those USB ports, or the micro USB ports, are meant for charging on either of these devices. Just be aware of that. So yeah, do not use that. You will need to have an actual battery charger, which I recommend anyways. But just so you know, you cannot charge these devices through the USB. So, with that being said, after that ridiculous surprise I had with the IPV 3LI that I never expected to have, I don't have a titanium coil to test out that dry burn test with that, but with what I saw on the nickel coil, that was extremely surprising. I did not expect it to be that bad. it's got to the point where I remember and here's the thing, at the beginning of the video, I was like, I would love all these devices. I'm never going to say anything bad about them because I've never had any issues with them. I don't do a lot of temp control myself, and I've never really done a dry burn test on any of these devices, but seeing what happened with this IPV 3LI, every single new temperature control device I buy, you can bet your ass I will be doing a dry burn test first and foremost before anything else. Now, I did mention in the dry burn test that the Sigelei did pass that one and was the winner of the dry burn contest. It still is. It corrected itself after one or two pulls, or after one or two ignitions, I guess if you want to call it, or fires, or of hitting the fire button. And then it automatically said, whoa, wait a second, this fucking thing is dry. The X Cube, I think what was happening was the first second or so of every single hit would be a dry hit, and then it would correct itself and prevent it from going any further. And that's why we didn't see the coils glow at all, just maybe a little bit of smoke at the beginning when hitting this fire button when we did the dry test on this. As a result from that, and after seeing what this thing did, I don't think I'm going to fail this one and give it such a harsh mark. This one in my mind gets like an A-, because it did still have those first initial 2 dry puffs. This one, however, goes from an F to, I would say, like a C. I wish it would have caught it sooner, or it would have kept catching it from the time I hit it, and I didn't try and hit it first and then adjust. I would have preferred to see it actually just not hit at all, or it would have been a shorter time, because I felt like that was a long time to hit, to the point where we did see some smoke come up. But this one gets a major F. This is, I would even give it an unsafe rating at the way it was firing. That was bad. And again, like I said before, this was the lowest setting one, and it hit the hardest on that dry coil. It was bad. So as a result of that, this has now eliminated itself from the competition of this Vape-off. And it's funny because I originally did plan on doing a head-to-head between these two devices, and I'm happy I threw in the X Cube, because had I known that this would do so poorly in the dry test, there wouldn't have even been a head-to-head. It's really bad, guys. So if you're using this in wattage mode, which is what I primarily use it for anyways, it's a great little device. It does hit up to 200 watts. I use my Twisted Messes RDA with 200 watts on it, no problem, and I've had no issues. But this one, in temp control mode, I will never be using it again. That's how bad it was. So, with that being said, let's talk temp control Vape-off between these two devices. First test is going to be at the maximum temperature setting, which is 572 and 600. And then what we'll do is adjust it accordingly and go down. From there, we'll do a 600 or a max temp mode to see what that looks like. Then we'll drop them both down to 500, so it's an even match, and see what they both look like. And then we'll drop them down even more to 420 degrees and do an even match up from there. I'm not going to go any lower than 420. I just feel like that is kind of where the low end is for a lot of people. I don't know many people who vape below the 420 mark. Maybe 400, but at 420 you should get a rough idea of what you're expecting in the low end between these two devices. So with that being said, let's start with the Sig 150 at in temperature control mode, 572 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 joules. Hopefully you can see that. If not, I'll put a little link in the description, or a little lower third here, just to mark it off. But let's test it out. So 100 joules, 572 degrees Fahrenheit. The crown nickel coils are in here, and let's see how it vapes. Really dense vapor, really flavorful. Actually, it's very, very flavorful. Again, it's a great vape at max wattage. This is personally where I prefer to vape temp control, because I like that hot vape, and it's giving me that hot, warm, dense vape, and that's what I like. So I'm going to take one more hit, and I'll switch to the X Cube. Alright guys, temp mode, X Cube 2, crown tank, nickel coil, 600 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's also set to max, by the way. So maximum being, again, what we just talked about, the 10% increase or whatever to the power for 2 seconds. So this is on maximum. So let's hit it and see how it vapes. Really dense vapor, really flavorful as well. In fact, very flavorful. But it's kind of interesting because I feel like this one is actually hitting a little bit cooler than what the Sig did at a lower temperature. This one was set to 572, this one's 600. It shouldn't be that much of a difference, but it's enough that it feels a little bit cooler to me. But the flavor is great, the vapor production is great, it's a dense vapor as well, but it's just not as hot as what I like. So that's just something to keep in mind with that one. It's still warm, don't get me wrong, if you're into cooler vapes, I still wouldn't recommend maxing this out, but it's cooler than I expected, let's put it that way. So I'll take one more hit off this, and we'll switch back and go at 500 degrees Fahrenheit on the Sig 150. Alright guys, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 joules as well. I'm going to keep it at 100 joules the whole time just to give optimal power to it, and let's see how it performs at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, those dense, thick, flavorful clouds. It's definitely a lot cooler though, so I am noticing a difference between 572 and 500, even if it's still at 100 joules. I'm definitely noticing a cooler vape. Again, it's not to the point where it's cold, it's still a warm vape, but it's not as hot as what it was. In fact, this feels more like this did at 600, at 100 joules, so that's actually kind of nice. But I'm going to take one more hit, and then we'll switch it. 500 degrees Fahrenheit on the X Cube 2. Alright guys, here we have the X Cube 2, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and maximum as well, just keep it fair. This is at 100 joules, this is at maximum, and let's see how it vapes. Definitely not as dense. I'm not going to say it's cooler, or I'm not going to say it's a cool vape, but again, it's definitely decreasing in temperature, and it also decreased in density as well, which is kind of disappointing. 500 degrees Fahrenheit, the density of it wasn't as good as what I'd hoped, but it's still a really nice vape nonetheless, and the flavor is still there. It's great flavor, just not as dense and not as hot. So, with that being said, I'm going to take one more hit off this, switch back to the Sigelei, go down to 420 degrees Fahrenheit, and we'll see how it vapes. Alright guys, 420 degrees Fahrenheit, again 100 joules as well, and let's see the difference between that and the last two tests. Again, great flavor, definitely a cooler vape. That one's, I wouldn't say cold, but I'd say it's definitely not warm, it's kind of in between. 100 joules as well, like I said, 420 degrees. Flavor is still there, just definitely not as dense. And again, the 420 on this felt like the 500 on this. Maybe a little bit less actually, definitely cooler on this than the 500 on this, on the X Cube. But it's a cooler vape at 420. Definitely not something that I prefer, but it might be something you prefer, which is why I do these tests to help you distinguish. And again, good vapor production, don't get me wrong, it's just not super dense. So, I'll take one more hit off this, and then we'll switch back to the X Cube at 420 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright guys, 420 degrees Fahrenheit, maximum setting as well, and let's see how it vapes. Cooler vape as well. I would say they're about the same at this temperature for cool vape, or for the temperature was the vape itself, but I did actually find this one a little bit denser at 420 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know why that was, but the Sigelei at 420 just didn't have as much density to it. This one does feel a little bit denser. What I'll do is I'll take another vape off it at 420, and then we'll finish off the video and find out who the winner actually was. Alright guys, moving on to the last category, which is pricing. So we've talked about the battery life, we've talked about quality and craftsmanship, we've talked about the chipset, and we've now found out and tested out the dry burn test, and we vaped on the temperature control in a Vape-off. between the SIG 150 TC and the X-Cube 2. As a result of those 4 tests, we've actually kind of eliminated the IPV 3LI, at least from the temp control portion. We're going to bring it back in just for the pricing aspect and talk about that a little bit more. Now, again, I'm going to tell you what I paid for each of these, and then I'm going to tell you what I found them for online just actually a couple days ago. I don't know if they've changed. They may change by the time you watch this video, depending on when you're watching it. And again, I didn't do a very extensive search, so we're just going off of what I found over a quick search. That being said, let's start with the most expensive device that I paid for. That was the SIG 150 TC. I purchased it in Ontario when I was out there, so I paid more for tax because it's 13% out there and it's 5% here in Calgary, which, by the way, I love the tax rate out here, don't get me wrong. It's awesome. But I paid $160 plus tax for the SIG 150 TC. Now, again, it was the newest device out of the 3, just based on the time I purchased it versus the time it was released. These 2 were released a little bit earlier than what I actually purchased them from. Just saying. So $160 for the SIG 150 TC is what I paid for that in a different province. And ironically, when I got back to Calgary, my local vape store had it for $145, so I may have messed up there myself. But moving on, the second cheapest was the IPV 3LI. The second cheapest or second most expensive, it's right in the middle between the 3, was the IPV 3LI, and I paid $145 for it. So again, it's still up there in price, and yes, I know, according to a lot of people out there, I overpaid. I've mentioned this before at the very beginning of the video. I do that sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I like to support my local B&M. Either way, plus, I mean, of course, you have the conversion rates and things like that, which I've talked about in other videos, the duties and taxes and things like that when bringing it from a different country, the States or wherever it might be. Just saying. But anyways, I paid $145 for this. It was new, but it wasn't brand new at the time. But this was the first device I purchased out of these 3. Moving on, the cheapest one was actually the X-Cube 2. I paid $120 for this, and it was the cheapest pretty much by far. I actually bought this at my local B&M as well, and again, you know, I just purchased this in the last couple of weeks. So, what did I find online? Well, from a quick search I did, and spending maybe 10-15 minutes of research looking at pricing, I was able to find all 3 of these devices for about the same price now, at about that $60 to $70 range, give or take. If you found it cheaper, awesome, but that's just what I've seen. And that was just a really quick look. It was from websites I've never ordered from before, so I can't verify anything. But assuming that's the case and that's a trend, you could probably expect at this point in time, as the release of this video, that all 3 of these devices are going to be around the same price, give or take. So ultimately, if we're looking at that, the pricing really doesn't have a clear-cut winner, because based on what I've seen online as of today, they're about the same price. Now, if we base it on what I paid for them, obviously the X-Cube was the least expensive of the 3, by a fair bit too. I mean, we're talking between the SIG 150 and the X-Cube, we're talking about $60 in difference, and that's quite a bit of money to differentiate between the 2. The IPV 3LI was kind of right in the middle, like I said, so based off pricing, you know, the X-Cube kind of wins it for me because I paid the least for it, but at the same time, they're all pretty much going to be priced around the same, and going off that, you can't really give a winner to one or the other, just simply based off pricing, ignoring everything else. Now, if we start including what you get for the price, something I didn't talk about was the packaging for these. I will keep wanting to say the TFE4. The X-Cube 2 actually came with a really nice little pouch, like a carry case, and it came with the USB charger as well. And of course, based on the features, it has Bluetooth, which we know is not really cheap. As far as I know, to put into a mod, it's not a cheap addition. And of course, it does have a lot more features on the actual device. The LEDs, you know, there's a lot more expensive components going into this device than what you might be seeing in the actual, say, IPV 3LI. That being said, best bang for your buck, in my opinion, I think it's going to be the X-Cube 2. It's a great price. It was the cheapest one I paid for, so I do have a slight bias there. Keep that in mind. But the only thing I will say for pricing, if they're all the same price, the Sigelei 150 at $60 is a steal. And the reason the one thing that Sigelei has over any other device is you're paying for the name, but the name isn't just a brand. It signifies a durable product. The Sigelei is going to be a tank. I mentioned it before. It's going to be a heavy hitter. You're going to be able to have that really, really nice, you know, mod that you can, it's kind of a workhorse, I guess, to put it the best way I can. It's a workhorse. It's one you're going to carry with you all the time. You drop it on occasion. You're more worried about the tank than the device itself. Like I said, I've dropped mine a number of times from different heights by accident. It's fallen out of my pocket. I'm sitting in a chair. It hasn't hit concrete, but it's hit hardwood flooring. It's hit carpet. You know, it's hit just a piece of wood. It's hit a lot of stuff, and it's dropped a lot of times. And ironically, it's the only device out of the three I've really dropped from any considerable height. I don't know why that is. I can't fault the device for it being like known or prone to dropping, but for some reason, maybe it's just mentally in the back of my head, I keep thinking it's a Sigelei. So if I don't drop it, it's almost like I'm not using it right. But anyway, so for durability and at the same price tag as everything else, yes, the Sigelei has great durability. It's a great workhorse. For feature-wise, I think the winner goes to the X-Cube 2. Just saying. For software-wise, IPV is putting out a lot of software, and they're always updating some stuff one way or another, but they will eventually make it obsolete and stop upgrading it, which I think they're probably going to end up doing with the 3LI soon, but I really do hope that they can have a software update that will fix that temperature control issue that I had. And maybe it was just me. I mean, if you guys want to send me a video or mention in the comments below if you've tried dry hitting on an IPV 3LI and had similar or very different results than what you just saw, let me know, because I'm curious. I want to know if whatever I did something to it, and the other thing I want to know is if the upgrade may have done something to it as well. Because I didn't dry hit it when it was just before it was upgraded, and I'm wondering if maybe the upgrade did something that may have changed it. So if you have an unupgraded IPV 3LI, and you've done a dry burn test, let me know how it went, because I want to know if it was part of the upgrade or if it's actually a whole new issue. Or, sorry, if it's actually a whole issue with the device in general from day one. So, with that being said, we've talked pretty much everything we wanted to cover: battery life, quality and craftsmanship, the chipset, the temp control tests, which had a very surprising outcome, by the way, and of course pricing. So, ultimately, the big question is, who is the winner? Now, at the beginning of this video, I said something, and I'm basically eating my words right now, because I said at the beginning of the video, I love all three, and if you want to sit here and watch someone bash one of these three devices, this isn't for you. Turns out, if you stuck around long enough, you got to see me bash a device anyways. I did not expect the IPV 3LI to fail that temp control test at all, especially as bad as what it did. So, yes, the IPV 3LI has been eliminated from contention. Yes, it has 200 watts, which I love, and I still use it, and I still will use it for 200 watts on my RDAs. But apart from that, as a whole, for the average consumer, I have to eliminate it just based on the temp control fail test. Now we have two devices left. We have the X-Cube 2 and we have the SIG 150 TC. Either way, I truly think whatever one you get, you will be happy with. And maybe you're going to judge your decision based on your lifestyle. If you have a heavy working lifestyle, maybe you work construction, you want a durable device, the SIG 150 is going to hold up. I really don't think the X-Cube 2, especially with this large trigger button here, I think if it falls the right way, it will damage quickly. I could be wrong, I haven't tried it myself. I don't intend to try it myself. Like I said, I paid for these devices. I want to keep using them. I don't want to break them. But I do think that this one is going to be more vulnerable. So you may choose to make your decision on that. You may also choose to make your decision based off of the feature set. For example, maybe you like the chipset in the X-Cube 2 over the Sigelei. Maybe you want something different than that same, kind of, I think it's the SX chip that they have in both of these. Maybe you want something different than that. Maybe that's what draws your attention to the X-Cube. Maybe you don't want something different than that, and you want the Sigelei because you know it, and you already have some sort of attachment to that particular chipset. Either way, that could be a decision maker as well. And of course, finally, you could also make your decision off of the temp control mode itself. Maybe you like the Sigelei temp control better. I know I personally did. Maybe you don't. Maybe you like the X-Cube temp control better. It's all up to you. Ultimately though, I think I've given enough information in this review to really let you make a decision on your own, and to hopefully, at least I hope I have, to help you make the decision that's right for your vaping style. I talk about this a lot now as vaping style. I'm starting to realize that not everyone has the same vaping style, and that to me is the biggest decision, or the biggest factor when making a decision on buying a new mod. What is your vaping style? I know people who have got the eLeaf 40 watt temp control device and love it, and I can't blame them for it. That's their vaping style. For me personally, I don't like that vaping style, that cooler, much, almost like a diluted vape in a way. It's not as dense, it's a lot more wispy. I don't like that vape style. If you do though, it's a great device. There's nothing wrong with liking an iStick 40 watt temp control. There isn't. And for the same reason, you may pick, for example, the Sig 150 over the X-Cube, or vice versa. It's all up to you. That being said, ultimately, for me, because I know you want to hear what I think, I don't know why, but you may, what is my ultimate pick? Which one do I pick to win this head-to-head competition that I put together? Obviously, like I said, I've already eliminated the IPV 3LI for obvious reasons. That being said, the biggest deciding factor in my decision was battery life. Yes, I have, 6 or 7 married 18650s that I could carry around with me, and I actually do anyways. So it's not like if I have a Sig 150, it's not like I don't have enough batteries to keep it powered for as long as I need to. I do. But it is always nice getting such long battery life out of something, and especially the massive difference between the X-Cube and the Sigelei. Like I said, 8.5 to 9 hours out of this at 100 watts, 13 hours out of this at 100 watts. That's a big difference. And for that reason, and primarily that reason, but not necessarily that reason alone, I have to go with the X-Cube over the Sigelei 150. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention as well, and one of the reasons why I went with the X-Cube, is because I love this TFV4 tank. But I had some issues on the Sigelei with it, and on the IPV for that matter. I don't know why it is, I don't know what causes it, but for some reason, the coils on the TFV4, if they're on the Sigelei or the IPV 3LI, and yes, I tried it on both, I only get about 5 days of coil life out of them. On the X-Cube, I have been using the same coil since I bought this thing. It has been going on for about 8 or 9 days now. In fact, I actually lost count after 5 days because I thought I was going to die any second. And we're up to at least 8. I think we're actually approaching 9. And it's held up strong. Still great flavor. Still great life. And hopefully it doesn't die on me for another couple of days at least. If I can make it to the weekend, it's obviously recording on Wednesday. If I can make it till Friday night with this coil, I would be stoked. It would be awesome. And again, I can't explain why you have better coil life on the X-Cube versus these other two devices, but I do. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe it's just one of those magical coils like that Crown coil I had in that Crown versus TFV4 video where somehow it went up to 170 watts without a dry hit, which has never happened to me before. But whatever it is, for whatever reason, on the X-Cube, at least by coincidence, I'm getting better coil life out of the TFV4. Don't know why, I just am. So keep that in mind. That's pretty much my deciding factor on why I chose the X-Cube over the Sigelei 150. As I mentioned before, there is an app for the X-Cube that I can't get to work. I don't know why. Again, it could be my phone, it could be something. I don't know what it is, but it just will not work for me. I'm going to try reinstalling it again. It would be the third time I reinstalled it, to be honest, so I don't know what to expect. If it's going to be different or not the third time around, but who knows. Anyways, guys, so yes, that is my review, or that's my head-to-head matchup. We had some surprises in the video. I'm looking at you, IPV. And then we had, a bunch of good, close battles, which is what I expected the entire way through. So ultimately, X-Cube wins it for me. However, I will leave you with one quick caveat before I sign off. And that is, if you're interested in temperature control, and you prefer temperature control to just normal Canthal coils, I think if strictly based off temp control, the Sig 150 wins it, just off temp control. Personally, I'm not a fan of temp control. and I prefer the TFV4 Canthal coils. So for that reason, that's why I picked the X Cube. But it's something to consider. If you like temp control, the Sig 150 might be the better option for you. They're both very close. They both had great vapes, but the temp control does get a slight edge in the Sig 150. With that being said, I've rambled on long enough. I think it's time to end the video here. So if you've stuck around this long, thank you so much for watching, and I'll leave you with a little bit of a treat here, which I haven't done in a while, and I will tip my hat to you, the viewers, who have stuck around long enough. So thanks for watching, YouTube. Until next time, happy vaping.